Hi again. Today I'm making a stained glass drum candle holder. So this was a metal candle holder that I bought and made fancy. So first of all, I used 22 gauge bare copper wire, and using this baling pliers, or you can wrap the wires around anything round that gives you the diameter that you need for your glass globs. So this particular project, I needed to have 10 millimeter and 12 millimeter, and I think it was 15 millimeter circles. So I made a few different ones. I'm using right here is 7/32 inch black backed copper foil. I always like the black back stuff because then if after you patina it, your glass is translucent, you won't see a shine on the inside of your glass globs of the copper color. So you'll always see that black, and that kind of works with both the black patina and the copper patina. So I cut that 7/32 inch into 4 even strips. And as you can see, I'm wrapping it around these are actually 10 millimeter diameter glass cabochons that I bought, and they came in different colors, and I just did up the ones that I had when I bought them, and I actually only used the blue ones for this project. But that's basically how I foiled all of the circles for this project, and the hearts and the teardrops, all that stuff. Just wrapping it around with a quarter the diameter of the quarter the width of the foil, and then just wrapping around my project and then burnishing it down so it's pressed down all the way. Even if you press it down nicely and you use good foil, you still got to watch out because this not really attached very well. You'll see when I solder this. So I'll get back to that. But right here is I'm trying to figure out where I want to put the glass. And I decided I was going to put a blue one at the top instead of that clear one I had earlier. I'm using these nice push pins that I bought that are heat resistant at the top, and they're stainless steel, so that the flux, if the flux gets on them or water gets on them, they're not going to rust, because I've had problems before with things rusting, and I don't really want things to rust. But the solder will still solder to these stainless steel pins, so you still got to be careful and not solder the pins to your project. So they're great to hold in place, to tack your project in place, but then you'll have to take them off before you finish your project. I actually had that wire drum shape that I got at a Goodwill, and I put a paper towel roll inside of the drum, and then a silicone sheet wrapped around the paper towel. So that really kind of filled that space so that all my glass for this project will keep with the nice curve of the drum itself, and that'll help make everything look like I want it to be. So you can see right now, remember those wire loops that I made earlier? Well, there's a row above where I'm working right now of the smaller 10 millimeter glass globs will go, and this area are 15 millimeter glass globs that I got that I am putting in this particular area, and I'm just tacking them in place right now. So I'm not permanently soldering them. I'll solder them in a few minutes. So you can see that some of these glass globs are dome shaped and some of them are flat on the top and flat on the bottom. It really depends on what you can get, because it's kind of hard to find a supply of the dome kind, which would have been really nice. Just use the dome kind for this, but I didn't have enough variety of colors, and I wanted more of a variety. And when it's done, they all look pretty. So, and I made sure that they were all the same size so they would fit in those circles that I created. Now, when you're making those circles, and I said I'm using the 22 gauge wire to make those circles, you still got to watch out. If you twist them too much, even with a 22 gauge, the wire will break, because you know, if you take wire and you bend it and bend it in the same spot too much, it will break. Well, the same thing with twisting them around in a for those little twisties in between each one, that once now and then one would break, and then I would have a shorter run. But that's okay. You can just use a shorter run. You don't have to have it all in one long run. You can just solder them together and continue on your merry way. That particular one that I'm soldering in right now is kind of an opalescent glass, which is really pretty. It kind of has a kind of an aurora borealis kind of look. Here's a whole bunch of hearts that I foiled. So the hearts come in all different sizes, and I'm using them to try to make little clusters of flowery type things. You know, you saw that one earlier, that was with the teardrops, and this right here is with the heart-shaped ones. So I'm figuring out where I want them to be, and if I need to, I will pin them in place at times, and sometimes they'll just kind of work okay without pinning if I'm very careful and almost like drop the solder in place, and I'm not actually touching the object when I'm doing this tacking in stage, when I'm just kind of holding them in place. So you just kind of like melt the solder in the air a little bit above your project, and then just kind of like drop it in place, and that works very nicely. And I like having all the different heart shapes, because I'm going to be using different size hearts in different places. And as you can see, I will be putting solder on all the copper. So on the edges of everything is going to be soldered. In the description area on my on the front page of this video, just like all my other videos, I will have a material list, and you will see where you can get some of these pieces that I'm using for this project. So with this little heart shaped, I decided I'm going to put little baby hearts on the outside of each of these hearts. So I'm actually not doing this in place. I'm using this area of my drum that I'm working on to kind of hold my parts in place, and then I'm going to figure out where they go. So I'm using the curvature of the paper towels with the silicone sheet on it. I'm using that to do a cluster of glass, and then I'm going to decide where I'm going to place it. So you can see that I have some other clusters already made. I'm figuring out, okay, I need another little heart up there, so I'll solder that one on. I actually added some wire hoops to this project, so I had some hoops that I already had, and they were the right size, and so that could make another ring for my drum project. And yes, all the metal for this drum that I got, I did cover with copper foil. So that copper right there that I'm soldering into is covered with copper foil. And the wider parts of the drum, I actually using a wider strip of copper foil. And I only use that when I really need to, because I think it's a little more expensive than the thinner stuff, but it does allow you to have a nicer surface for your project instead of having all the little seams that you would have if you just wanted to use a whole bunch of thin 7/32 inch foil. So as you can see, I don't have this like completely planned out. Like, I'm just know I'm going to be using these different pieces and make clusters, and I'm like trying to figure out which ones are going to meet the best. So I kind of like tack that circle in place, and now I'm like, okay, I want to use a whole bunch more teardrops, but what ones are going to fit? So now I have 3 different size teardrops, and I'm trying to figure out what size is going to really work for me here. I want to have something that's going to look pretty, but also is going to be attached to the base at some point. Because if I don't attach things to the drum itself, then it won't be as strong. So I really need to have things attached. Okay, I think I put that up there. Okay, so that'll work. And I probably have enough flux on it already, so I can just like put it on right there. And now I got to find another piece. So I have a bunch of big ones, and I go, okay, well, that's really not going to fit. I decided that the point of all these teardrops are pretty much going to go to the center of the blue glob there. So that's kind of how I figured out what ones I'm going to use. So I wanted them all like looking like they radiated out of that blue one. And they're going to be like flowers of different size petals, or designs of different size petals if you don't think of it as a flower. I just kind of was thinking flowers. And the smaller gaps I'm just going to fill with solder. And I'm going to do, well, you'll see in a few minutes, I'm going to do some like curly Q wire for filling the other areas. I'm not filling this in all the way. I'm just making designs on it. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, if I use small ones there, is that going to fit? And you pretty much have to, you know, as it's getting toward the end of a petal like this, you kind of really should figure out what you're doing before you solder the last few in, or you're going to have like too much of a gap in one place and not enough gap somewhere else. So yeah, that's pretty much what I did here. Was I tried to figure out what size petals would look best, and I decided I would have that. So I'm using like 3 big ones, and that's nice because the bigger ones fill obviously more room, and I'll kind of like even them up and then solder them in place. Again, I'm using the technique where I am kind of like dropping a glob of solder for the first few ones so that they don't move. And it's either that or I'm going to have to pin them down so they don't move that way. But basically, they won't move very much if I just drop the solder. Again, I'm not going to heat up a whole like teardrop or glass glob. I'm not going to heat up a whole one at once. So I'm going to have to like skip from one thing to another. Because if I heat it up, if I worked on only one glob and spent a lot of time with it, with the solder, it would fall out of its foil. The stickiness on the foil, even though I did burnish it down nicely, will just come off. And I like to have some variety. So like this one, I'm going to have the teardrop shape will have the big part of the teardrop against the circle. And I wanted to use different kinds, different color interior globs, just so that there's nice variety. So that kind of held it in place. So I'm good there. Then I'm gonna put a couple more on, and then I gotta again figure out really what I'm doing, because it's getting toward the end. You know, once you're past like the halfway mark, you better figure out what you're doing, unless you don't mind taking things off. I usually kind of like to just keep going. So now I got to figure out, will that fit nicely? No. Okay, how about a little guy? Well, if I put a little guy, no, I can't get two little guys. So, this is the only thing you can do is just keep going. I decided a big one would fit nicely, so I'm going to go with that. Which is another good reason why it's great to foil. If you get like a whole bunch of hearts or a whole bunch of teardrops, whatever, foil them all if that's all you're going to use them for, so that when you start making your project, you have a whole bunch of sizes to work with. You don't have to stop working just to foil some more. I mean, there's still times when I've had to stop working because I couldn't do things. So as you see, I have a bunch of different ones, so I can just choose, okay, well, maybe I'll do this, figure out what you want to do and do it. So I kind of decided that I'm going to have these medium size. They're going to radiate all around this nice blue glob, but they're going to attach to both the vertical and one of the hoops of my drum. Because as I said, you really need to try to connect everything to something, because it'll be much stronger if you do so. If you just have these designs floating in the middle of nowhere, they're not going to be very well attached. These tweezers I'm using are silicone at the end, which is really awesome because they won't get hot and the solder won't stick to them. So that's a really plus for tools. You want to figure out how you're going to use tools that are not going to make your life harder. So I put some flux all the way around it, and now I just need to put my little guys in. So I'm putting a little one in between each one. And I'm going to have to order more of these because I ended up using a lot of these pieces on this project. But these are actually pieces of glass that I've had for years, and I obviously still had some. So that's really cool that I had a whole bunch of fun pieces of glass all ready for this project. Now I do still have a bunch of circles of different sizes that I started back when I was buying these things, but I decided not to use a bunch of clear circles in this project. I used a few on the chains of different colors around the earlier that I showed you, but I didn't use a lot of them. Now you might ask, why would I foil them with such a thin piece of foil? And that's because obviously the thicker the piece of foil you use, the more it encroaches into the glass design. So if I use a thicker piece of foil, then I wouldn't have this beautiful teardrop shape. It would have a really thick outline around it of foil, and I didn't really want that look. Most of the times I want just the glass, which is fine and it's pretty, but yeah, they're not attached as well. So now I have a bunch of swirlies that I made, and these were made out of 18 gauge tinned copper wire. Now, why did I use tinned? Well, if it's tinned, it's really handy. You don't have to cover it in solder. It takes the patina quite nicely, or you could just leave it the silver color and it looks like the same color as solder, so it's kind of nice to use. but I still decided that I didn't want the perfectnness of the swirls. As you can see, they're just perfectly round um, wire, and it just makes a beautiful look, but it's not quite the look that I want. So I do end up going here and there and filling, especially the centers of the coils, with solder. So there's a little bit of irregularity to them. They're not just perfect wires. And that's just because I didn't want that look, not because I needed to fill them. So once now and then, I'm covering up the copper that you see on everything. So all the rest of the project was done with untinned wire or such, so that I needed to add solder to all that copper foil and any copper wires that are showing. So I will be adding solder to the copper all the time for the rest of the project. I'm also smoothing out some of the globs all the time as I go. I just made a whole bunch of these squiggles, so the coils, so I'm like, where am I going to put these coils? And I have to figure them out as I go. And I take breaks once now and then from adding things to doing what I'm doing right now, is adding solder to the sides of everything that's not coated in solder yet. Yes, this does take a lot of solder to do a project like this. This probably took most of a whole pound of solder. So if you don't want to buy a lot of solder, then don't do this type of three-dimensional sculpture type stained glass, because it really does take a lot of solder. It's fun and it looks great when it's done, but yeah, it's not just a little light piece of solder. It's a lot of solder. And one thing about doing what I'm doing right now and adding solder as I go, even though I'm not really finished with the project, is eventually, if you keep on doing this, you hopefully won't miss areas. Whereas if you waited and then did the finishing, covering the rest of it with solder all at once, you may find that you've missed some areas. So I like to do it here and there. So some of these coily things that I made were really big, and some were quite small. So I have to make them fit. So that one was, I kind of like, I have the biggest ones, and I'm trying to put them where they go, where they will fit. And if they don't fit, then I'm going to have to either not use them, or like this one, you can see I cut part of it off and I'm going to make it fit there. So the end of it is kind of like coiling into the glass next to it. Now, if you're doing a project, I could have used gloves, which probably would have been a good idea, especially my silicone heat resistant gloves that help dissipate the heat so I don't get burned, because this wire does get hot. So you can see I added a little bit of solder to the middle there, and I end up adding quite a lot to a lot of them. So I made some smaller coils like this one, and that'll help fill the little areas. It's kind of using the solder itself to help hold it in place, but it didn't really work very well, so I had to get the tweezers out. That happens. So following the curve of the drum by having the paper towels in there is really essential. You needed something. If you're doing something that's not flat, so if you're doing any three-dimensional project, you need to try to figure out how to hold the inside so that you can attach your glass without it just going flat. You want to, if you want to follow the contour of your project, whether you're doing a lamp or like this, which is a candle holder, if you want to have that look of following the same contour, then you're going to have to figure out what to do to fill that space. Using sheet silicone like I have and wrapping around a paper towel worked great for this. But there's all different ways one could fill a space. And I have lots of different projects that I've done that sometimes I have to make a frame to hold in place and to make that shape. So sometimes it has to be like a sphere I've made. All different things you might have to decide to do to get that shape that you need. And now I am pulling the paper towel out. There it was. And I have my pretty project. I'm putting down another sheet of silicone there so that I can now solder the inside of everything. So this is like back soldering, I sometimes call it. I'm using some flux, putting flux on everything, and I'm going to add solder to anything that's copper and areas of the glass itself that may need to be strengthened. So anything that's copper colored is going to get solder on it. And then any of the glass globs that look like they need an extra little piece of solder on the backside will get soldered. When you're done with your project and you've finished cleaning it and polishing it and everything, if you then lose a piece of glass, yes, you can go back and refoil something and resolder it in, or you may choose to just glue it in place if that's what it takes. So this is what it looks like before I have patinaed it. And you can see that I added a lot of solder to all those little wiggles. Now this is the first patina I put on it, was copper patina. So I'm using a toothbrush and just brushing on copper patina, but I did end up lightly brushing black patina on top of it afterwards, which I don't actually have a picture of that. But that was to get it a little bit darker color and a little bit more of an uneven kind of old-fashioned look. But you can see that the patina took to the solder really quick. It looks all kind of dry and cakey when you're done, even after you've washed it. I'm using linseed oil to shine it afterwards. Some people like to finish their stained glass with different methods. Whatever you end up doing, it's usually looks better if you do polish it with something. So here I am just showing you, I have a real candle on the inside, and it had a glass kind of a tube that went inside of it, and it just really looks pretty. And even with just one candle, it really makes a lot of shinies all over the place. So you can imagine that, you know, if this was in your bathroom or in a hall and you had either a battery candle or a real candle, in the evening it would just look really pretty. And these aren't even crystals. These are just flat glass or domed glass. And they really make a nice look. Thank you for watching this, and I hope this inspires you. go to your Goodwill or junkyard or buy something new and turn it into a different work of art. Thanks. Bye.